When someone asks about your childhood, you just freeze, like the answer isn't quite there. Not because it was terrible, not because nothing happened, but because somewhere between 7 and 17, you skipped entire chapters of your own life. And what most people don't realize is this isn't really about growing up too fast. It's about something deeper. It's about how your identity was shaped in moments where you had to adapt before you were ready. Because when a child learns to survive early, those adjustments don't stay temporary. They become patterns. And over time, those patterns start to feel like personality. What looks like strength is often something you built to cope. What looks like independence can be the absence of support. Even success can carry a quiet weight because it's tied to proving your worth. And healing, it's not about becoming someone new. It's about slowly realizing you learned to be this way to survive, not because it was who you were meant to be. And here's the part most people don't talk about. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a single moment you could point to and say, that's when everything changed. It was quieter than that. It looked like small responsibilities showing up too early, making dinner when no one asked, taking care of things that weren't really yours to carry. It looked like emotional awareness developing before it should have. You could feel tension in a room instantly. You knew when something was off, even if no one said a word. You didn't just hear conversations. You read them, the tone, the pauses, the shift in someone's mood. Long before you were supposed to understand people, you were already learning how to manage them. And according to research on early role adaptation, this kind of heightened awareness isn't random. It develops when a child learns that paying attention isn't optional, it's necessary. Because in your environment, missing those signals had consequences. So you didn't miss them. You learned to read the room before you ever learned to just be in it. And then there's a moment not loud, not dramatic, but something shifts. You stop being just a child. And without anyone saying it out loud, you become the stable one, the one who doesn't make things harder, the one who figures things out, the one who holds everything together when no one else can. Not because you chose that role, but because someone had to take it. And in that moment, your brain makes a quiet decision. If things fall apart, I'll be the one who keeps them from breaking. Research on early role adaptation shows that when children are placed in unstable environments, they don't wait to be guided. They reorganize themselves. They become more aware, more controlled, more responsible than they should be. And that's when survival mode turns on. Not in a visible way, but internally, constantly scanning, constantly adjusting, constantly preparing. And over time, that state stops feeling temporary. It becomes who you think you are. And there's actually a name for this. Psychologists call it parentification. It's when a child takes on emotional or practical roles that were never meant for them. But that word can be misleading because it sounds structured, almost intentional. What it doesn't show is how quietly it happens, how a child slowly becomes responsible for things far beyond their age. Dr. Lisa Hooper, who has studied this extensively, found that children in these roles often appear highly mature. They seem calm, independent, capable. But here's the key reframe. That's not maturity. That's adaptation. It's a nervous system learning to function in environments where stability isn't guaranteed, where being aware isn't optional, it's necessary. So instead of developing naturally, you adjusted early. And over time, that adjustment became your baseline. What looked like strength to others was actually a response to pressure, not who you were meant to be, but who you had to become. And this is the part where things start to make sense. Because if you grew up like this, you didn't just struggle. You developed something most people didn't. You became emotionally intelligent. Not in a textbook way, but in a lived, instinctive way. You can read people almost instantly. You notice tone, pauses, the small shifts most people overlook. You don't just hear what someone says, you pick up on what they mean. And because of that, you're always a step ahead. You anticipate reactions. You adjust before conflict even happens. You solve problems before they fully form. Research on early adaptive behavior shows that children placed in high responsibility environments often develop advanced pattern recognition and emotional awareness. And from the outside, that looks like strength. It looks like maturity. It looks like you have something others don't. And in a way, you do. If this is starting to feel a little too accurate, go ahead and like the video and tell me in the comments. Were you the one who always had to be the responsible one, but that ability didn't come from nowhere? It came from learning very early that paying attention was how you stayed safe. And here's the part most people don't expect. Those same strengths don't stay strengths in every situation. Because what helped you survive chaos doesn't always help you feel safe and calm. You can handle pressure. You can step into difficult situations and figure things out quickly. You stay composed when things fall apart. But when everything is quiet, that's when it gets uncomfortable. Simple things become harder. Resting without guilt, doing nothing without feeling like you're missing something, letting things be unfinished, because your system isn't used to stillness. Research on chronic stress adaptation shows that when the brain becomes used to constant alertness, it begins to associate calm with uncertainty. So even when nothing is wrong, your body doesn't fully believe it. Rest doesn't feel natural. It feels unfamiliar, and sometimes even unsafe, because for so long, being on wasn't a choice. It was how you stayed in control. And letting go of that feels like losing something important. And this is where it starts to show up in your life now. Not in obvious ways, but in patterns. In relationships, you naturally become the giver, the one who listens, who understands, who holds space for everyone else. You don't even think about it. It just feels normal. But receiving, that's where it gets complicated. Because research on early role conditioning shows that when care is one-sided in childhood, people often recreate that dynamic later in life. So you may find yourself drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable. Not because you want that, but because it feels familiar. And then there's control. You think ahead. You replay conversations. You analyze what was said and what it meant. Your brain is always working, always trying to stay one step ahead. And on top of that, you carry emotional labor. You manage the energy in the room. You adjust yourself to keep things smooth, even when you're tired, even when no one notices. And over time, that becomes your default way of being. And over time, this creates something deeper, an internal tension that's hard to explain. From the outside, everything looks fine. You're capable, reliable, maybe even successful. You get things done. People trust you. They depend on you. But internally, something doesn't fully land because your sense of worth became tied to your usefulness. Research on early role conditioning suggests that when children are valued for what they do rather than who they are, they begin to equate love with contribution. So, even when you achieve something, it doesn't feel like enough. There's always another standard, another expectation, another quiet pressure to prove yourself again. And even when you're surrounded by people, there's still a kind of loneliness, not because no one is there, but because no one sees how much of you is built around holding everything together. You're present, you're engaged, but a part of you still feels unseen. Because you've spent so long being needed, that simply being yourself doesn't always feel like it's enough. And this is where things begin to shift. Not by fixing everything, but by understanding it differently. Because healing doesn't start with changing who you are. It starts with recognizing what you had to become. The first step is grief. Not loud, overwhelming grief, but quiet acknowledgement. Research on developmental psychology shows that when early needs are unmet, there's often a delayed recognition of what was missing. You begin to see the childhood you didn't fully get to experience, the version of you who didn't have to be strong all the time. And that realization matters because it allows you to separate who you are from what you had to do to survive. The next step is reframing your worth. Being needed is not the same as being valued. You don't have to earn care. You don't have to prove your place. And slowly, you learn something unfamiliar. How to receive. To let someone else show up. To not carry everything alone. And over time, you begin to let go. Not of your strength, but of the belief that you have to hold everything together all the time. And if you've been feeling things like this, but never really had the words for it, subscribe. Because this channel is built for people who think deeply, notice everything, and feel more than they show.